Welcome to my channel. My name is the Queen Bee, and on this channel I will talk about murders, unsolved cases, and mysterious disappearance in Italy. I am an Italian girl who wants to make you participate in the crimes of Italian history. I realize during my travels around the world that Italy is very underestimated, and I decided to make a change, telling you about our multiple crimes. Today, we will talk about a very sad case. A case where we really understand that we cannot trust anyone in the world. The Villarbasse massacre. On 20 November 1945, the owner of the Simonetto farmhouse in Villarbasse, in the province of Turin, the lawyer Massimo Gianoli, born in Gemme on 1st November 1980, 65 years old, manager of Agi Piedmont until 1940, was having dinner in the manor house purchased in 1920, served by the maid Teresa Delfino, while in the house of the tenant Antonio Ferrero, the birth of a granddaughter was celebrated, and, in addition to the tenant, his wife Anna, his son-in-law Renato Morra, the maids Rosa Martinoli were present, and Fiorina Maffiotto, plus a 2-year-old and the new worker Marcello Gastaldi. For men, Francesco La Barbera, Giovanni Puleo, Giovanni Dignoti, and Pietro Lala, who, at the time of the events, was hiding behind the false identity of Francesco Saporito, and he had worked for a few months in the farmhouse, at 8 in the evening broke into the farmhouse, kidnapping everyone present to carry out a robbery, as they knew that the lawyer kept some large sums of money in the house. When, however, one of the robbers, the baseman, suddenly dropped the mask that hid his face on the ground. One of the kidnapped women gasped and recognized him as the man who, until a few days earlier, had worked with them in the farmhouse as a boy. The robbers, now discovered, then decided to kill all possible witnesses and took the victims, one by one, to the cellar and hit them with a stick, then throwing them into a rainwater collection tank located in the farmyard. The only one to attempt a defense was Renato Morra, former partisan leader, who managed to wound La Barbera in the face with the wire with which his hands had been tied. The husbands of the two maids, Gregorio Doleatto and Domenico Rosso, who had later come to the farmhouse in search of their wives, were also killed in the same way. Only the child was spared, as he would not have been able to recognize any of the criminals. The robbers went back into the house and stole 200,000 lire, a pair of gold earrings, and other objects of little value. 4 salami, 3 pairs of socks, 10 and kerchief. Giovanni Dignoti continued his everyday life in Turin while Puleo, La Barbera and Lala returned to Sicily to Mezzogiuso, where the latter was killed in a showdown between mafiosi. After 8 days of searches, during which, at first, a mass kidnapping of the missing people was thought to have occurred, on November 28, the young miller Enrico Coletto lowered himself into the cister and found the 10 corpses. In a vineyard of the farmhouse, a jacket stained with blood was found thrown on the ground with a label on which was written Caltanissetta. This small but fundamental clue indicated that at least one of the bandits was a Sicilian. After 4 months of investigations and a series of unjustified arrests, including Renato Morra's brother and a Sicilian who had been a partisan near Villarbasse and who, on the very evening of the massacre, had saved a neighbor's house in Caltanissetta from a fire, the Carabinieri, led by the young second lieutenant Armando Losco, traced back to Dignoti, thanks to a fragment of the ration card that the bandit had partially burned in an attic he rented in Via Rombò in Rivoli. With a ruse, They made him believe he was the last arrested instead of the first. They induced him to name his accomplices. Once arrested, they confessed. The journalist Gianfranco Venet recalls the episode in the book Vola Colomba. When the Allied police persisted in attributing the massacre to revenge perpetrated by partisans who had not stopped fighting for the revolution. Having declared a state of siege all around Villarbasse, the site of the massacre, having raided the Turin hills with armored vehicles and patrols in war gear, struggling with all the power of their organization, the allies, the assassins, were nowhere to be found because they were protected by communists infiltrated into the police and present in the government. In December, amidst gala dinners, the din of national anthems and games of raising and lowering the flag, the Anglo-Americans returned the powers to the Italian administration and attacked to it the moral task of resolving the investigation into the massacre unprecedented of the history of horror. Transferred to Le Nuove, a prison in the Piemontese capital, after an initial detention in Venaria Reale, they were sentenced to capital punishment in the trial which took place on 5 July 1946. On the following 29 November, the Supreme Court rejected the appeal, with the pardon later denied by Enrico De Nicola, provisionally head of the state. At 7:45 a.m. on 4 March 1947, the three were accompanied by the prison chaplain Father Ruggero Cipolla to the Basse di Stura shooting range in Turin. Shortly before the execution of the sentence, La Barbera in Puleo shouted phrases praising Andrea Finocchiaro Aprile and Sicilian independence. The last death sentences imposed in Italy were then carried out by a firing squad made of city policemen. Some journalists also witnessed the execution, including Giorgio Bocca, who described the episode in La Repubblica coinciding with the 60th anniversary. The victims of this incredible massacre were called Massimo Gianoli, lawyer, 65 years old; Antonio Ferrero, tenant, 51 years old; Anna Varetto, Ferrero's wife, 45 years old; Renato Morra, Ferrero's son-in-law, 24 years old; Marcello Gastaldi, laborer, 45 years old; Teresa Delfino, maid, 61 years old; Rosa Martinoli, maid, 65 years old; Fiorina Mafiotto, maid, 32 years old; Gregorio Doleatto, husband of Fiorina Marfiotto, and Domenico Rosso, husband of Rosa Martinoli. Now we will talk about a love affair happened in Rome, the Bebawi case. The Bebawi case, also called the Dolce Vita murder, was a murder committed in Rome in 1964. Attracted the attention of public opinion and was later remembered as one of the most famous and discussed judicial cases of the Dolce Vita period. On the morning of January 20, 1964, in the office of the Tricotex Textile Company in a building on a side street of Via Veneto, a secretary arriving at work found the body of the company's owner, 27-year-old Farouk Kurbaji, killed with 4-shot gun and with his face disfigured by vitriol. The secretary will tell the investigators that a few days earlier she had listened to a phone call from an Egyptian woman, Gabrielle Bebawi, known as Claire, which had upset the victim. The secretary said that he was her lover. The investigations therefore hypothesized a crime of passion, arresting Claire, the victim's lover for 3 years now, together with her husband Youssef Bebawi, an Egyptian industrialist. The couple lived in Lausanne, but she often came to Rome to visit her lover, and on the day of the crime they were passing through Rome. It was hypothesized that the crime had been committed in the late afternoon of Saturday, 18 January. Because of 5 p.m., the victim was still alive, as the doorman saw her go out at the time. The married couple were in the hotel at the time after having just arrived in Rome from Switzerland and left at 7:30 p.m. for Naples, and in this time interval, it was hypothesized that it would have been possible to carry out the murder. It turned out that Bebawi had purchased a bottle of vitriol in Switzerland. During the interrogation, the husband stated that on Saturday afternoon, after leaving the hotel, he accompanied his wife to the door of the building where the victim's office was located, to have a decisive meeting with her lover. Shortly afterwards, the wife returned telling her husband that she had shot her ex-lover and she had also glimpsed the gun and the empty Victor bottle. The wife, on the other hand, denied any wrongdoing, and indeed, she accused her husband, confirming that she had gone up to her office, but also that, while she was arguing with Farouk, her husband arrived with a gun in his hand. The latter, after a brief scuffle, shot Farouk, killing him and threw in vitriol in his face. The couple was arrested in Athens and taken to Italy, where they were tried. The first instance trial was extremely long, and the two defendants, husband and wife, accused each other of the murder. The defense highlighted for the wife the story of a woman who wanted a lover without giving up her social position, while for the husband, that of a man who wanted to keep his wife but also her honorability. The first-degree trial ended with acquittal due to insufficient evidence. The sentence was appealed in 1968, and the couple was sentenced to 22 years in prison. He and she 20 years, but both had to by then fled abroad, and it was not possible to request extradition, not even after the convictions were confirmed in cassation in 1974. Two television films will be dedicated to the Bebawi case. Bebawi, Il delitto di Via Lazio, directed in 1983 by Michele Massa, and Il caso Bebawi, directed in 1996 by Valerio Jalongo. Furthermore, episodes of the series Crimes, Black Stars, Yellow and Black, and an episode of the Demoni Urbani podcast will be dedicated to the case. Okay, now we will talk about a murder done by a woman that lost her mind, obviously for a man. Caterina Fort, known as Rina, born in Santa Lucia di Budoia, the 28th of June 1915, and died in Florence, the 2th of March 1988, was an Italian criminal, protagonist of a well-known crime in post-World War II in Italy. Found guilty of murder for the killing on 29 November 1946 of her lover's wife and their children, Caterina Fort was sentenced to life imprisonment and then pardoned by the President of the Republic in 1975 after having served almost 30 years of prison. The victims of the murder were Franca Pappalardo, 40 years old, Giovanni Ricciardi, 7 years old, Giuseppina Ricciardi, 5 years old, and Antonio Ricciardi, 10 months old. The newspaper of the time nicknamed her the Beast of Via San Gregorio. Rina Fort had a troubled life, dotted losses and tragedies. Her father died during an execution in the mountains in an attempt to help her overcome a difficult passage. Her fiancé died of tuberculosis shortly before the wedding. She then discovered herself suffering from early sterility. At 22, she married a fellow villager, Giuseppe Benedetto, who already on the day of the wedding showed signs of imbalance that were destined to degenerate into madness, to the point of having to be admitted to a mental hospital. Having obtained a separation and taken back her maiden name, Rina Fort moved to Milan to stay with her sister. In 1945, she met Giuseppe Ricciardi, a Sicilian owner of a fabric shop in Via Tenca, becoming his work partner first as a sales assistant, then her lover, without however being aware, so she declared, of the fact that he was already married. Giuseppe had a wife and 3 children in Catania, but his relationship with Fort continued peacefully until family friends reported worried rumors about her husband's betrayal to his wife Franca. Ricciardi apparently had the habit of introducing Fort as his wife to colleagues and friends. So, in October 1946, Franca Ricciardi decided to join her husband in Milan with her children. Rina Fort was fired and found work as a clerk in a friend's pastry shop, continuing to date Giuseppe Ricciardi. However, with the arrival of Ricciardi's wife and children, their relationship was now compromised, and Franca Ricciardi had made it clear to Rina Fort that she had to definitely give up her man. It seems that the woman has revealed to her that she was pregnant due to third time, causing further frustration in her rival. On November 29, 1946, Rina Fort took revenge on the wife of her lover and on her 3 children, killing them. Rina Fort herself reconstructed the dynamics of the crime in her only detailed confession, made at the Milan police station about a week after her murder, after days of exhausting interrogation. That evening, I was wandering aimlessly when I automatically turned right and entered building number 40 in Via San Gregorio, crossed the inside of the hallway, went up to the first floor, and knocked on the entrance door of the Ricciardi family. The lady asked who she was, then she opened the door. I entered, holding out her hand, and she greeted me cordially. I remembered that she was holding little Antoniuccio in her arms, the little one. She ushered me into the kitchen and made me sit down while the other two children played with each other. As soon as I sat down, I felt a slight discomfort, so much so that Mrs. Papalardo gave me a glass of water and lemon. Then she wanted to clarify the strangeness of my visit. "Dear lady," she said, "you must put your mind at rest and not take people away from me, who has a family with children. This absolutely has to stop, because I'm dear and good. But if you make me dizzy, I'll end up sending you to your country." I would like to point out that before handing me the glass, the lady placed the child on the high chair, and after speaking, she brought me a bottle of liquor from the kitchen in order to offer me a drink. She then returned to the dining room to get a corkscrew, having not found one in the kitchen. At this point, while Papalardo was in the dining room, I broke the neck of the liquor bottle and poured in plenty. Blinded by jealousy from the words addressed to me by Papalardo just before her, as well as excited by the liquor, I got up and went towards her. Once I reached the anteroom, I met her while she was trying to come to the kitchen. At the sight of me, she became frightened, retreating. I threw myself on top of her and hit her repeatedly on the head with an iron that I had taken from the kitchen and whose dimension I am not able to specify. Papalardo fell stunned on the floor. I continued to hit her. Later, Giovanni, while I was hitting her mother, had thrown himself into her defense by grabbing my legs. With a shake, I threw him into the right corner of the antechamber and raised the iron on him. Some shots missed and hit the wall, others hit his head. I specified that I shot down Giovannino first. Then I entered the kitchen, I hit Pinuccia. I gave Antoniuccio, sitting in the high chair, a single blow to the head. Meanwhile, Giovannino had gotten up from the corner where she was lying, so I landed more blows on him, causing him to fall lifeless to the ground with his head near the kitchen door. Pinuccia, eating the kitchen, had fallen next to the table. Terrified by the macabre spectacle, I went down the stairs and went to the door of the shop behind, immediately to the right of the staircase. From inside, the dog barked angrily. I wanted to return to the site of the massacre, but I took a wrong turn and found myself on the steps leading to the cellar. I sat on the first steps for a few moments to catch my breath. Then I went up the stairs to the apartment, in which the lights were on as I had left them. Mrs. Papalardo and her 3 children had not breathed their last. I entered the bedroom, took off my shoes, and put on a pair of Ricciardi ones, the ones with 7 holes. Over my shoulders, over my coat, I threw a jacket, then opened several drawers, removing an unspecific sum of money and some gold jewelry. I ransacked the whole house. I don't know for what purpose. No one had died yet. The little one was breathing. The lady was struggling. Pinuccia was gasping. Papalardo, staring at me with wide eyes, said softly, "Wretch, wretched, I forgive you because Giuseppe loves you so much." She then added, "I recommend the children, the children." The lady asked me for help while she continued to struggle. She sobbed, then she fell onto her face. I headed towards the bedroom and put all my body weight on her. She no longer spoke, but she still breathed. Without realizing what I was doing, I spilled a liquid on the victim's face, and before walking away defiantly, I stuffed diapers soaked on the same liquid into her mouth. I then put my shoes back in the bedside table and my jacket back where I had found it. The victims were still dying when I closed the door and went down the stairs. I went home, ate 2 fried eggs with breadsticks. I couldn't sleep that night. The following day, I went to work as normal. The crime was discovered the next morning by Ricciardi's new shop assistant, Pina Tomaschini, who had gone to Via San Gregorio to get the keys to the shop from Mrs. Papalardo. The victims lay lying in a pool of blood, brain matter, and traces of vomit. Mrs. Papalardo and her eldest son in the entrance of the apartment, the two younger children in the kitchen. The doorman of the building said that he had closed the gate at 9 p.m. sharp like every evening, but the lock was missing and was being repaired and anyone could have entered without difficulty. The investigation was entrusted to the famous Commissioner Nardone. For the police, the murderer was an acquaintance of Papalardo because she had welcomed him into her home and she had also offered him a liquor. There could have been two murders, sir, given that the dirty glasses, of one of which traces of lipstick were found, were three in total. It appears that some pieces of silverware of modest value were missing, almost certainly stolen to clumsily simulate a robbery that degenerated into murder. The investigators almost immediately discarded the theory of robbery. The family was in at least precarious economic conditions, and Ricciardi's shop, especially after the dismissal of Rina Fort, who apparently had talent in business, was always one step away from closing, with numerous bills of exchange in protest. The one in Via San Gregorio definitely seemed like a crime of passion, given that children who would not even have been able to testify had been killed. The woman had been strangling before she was killed, and some of the woman's hair was found in her nails. Furthermore, a torn photograph of the Ricciardi couple on their wedding day was found at the crime scene. Giuseppe Ricciardi was in Prato for work. Tracked down and informed of what had happened, he was interrogated and gave the name of Rina Fort, his shop assistant and lover since September 1945. The police looked for her at her home in Via Mauro Macchi 89, then in the pastry shop where she worked in Via Settala 43. She was arrested while serving customers, joking and telling anecdotes, and taken to the police station. The interrogation began on November 30, 1946 in the afternoon, less than 24 hours after the multiple murder. Rina Fort admitted to having worked for Ricciardi, but she denied that she was her lover and that she knew where she was. She also denied any responsibility for the crime. On December 2nd, when she brought Ricciardi home, showed herself to be indifferent. She was taken back to the police station after 17 hours of interrogation by the commissioner daughter of Serafino. She began to give in. She admitted that she had been Ricciardi's lover, complete with wedding ring, and that the relationship had ended with the arrival of his wife. She reported to her defense lawyer that she had been beaten during the interrogation. She claimed to have participated in the massacre, but not to have touched the children. She accused Ricciardi of being the instigator of the crime, together with an unidentified Carmelo. She added that, in the intention of her ex-lover, she and Carmelo should have staged a theft to intimidate Franca Papalardo, induce her to believe that her life in Milan was too dangerous, and push her to return to Catania. But once they arrived in Via San Gregorio, the situation would have worsened, also due to a drugged cigarette that the mysterious Carmelo would have offered her. And you can talk about it. If you are so interested, read the reports, contemplate the photographs, go ahead, if you can help it, to the Court of Assise, discuss it in the evening. But the memory of those three children savagely killed, of those three little faces left there immobile forever, with the astonished expression of that infant's eye chair from which the tender blood dripped, remains deep in your heart. The souls of the three innocent dominate with pale and painful light the crowd gathered at the court, and they may be looking at you. On 10 January 1950, the trial against Rina Fort, accused of massacre, began at the Assize Court of Milan. The woman, defended by the lawyer Antonio Marsico, attended all the hearings, sporting a showy yellow scarf with earning her the nickname Belva with the canary scarf. Between one hearing and another, she gave her several interviews, portraying herself as absolutely involved in such heinous events and declaring to a reporter, "Do you think I would be so calm if I had those children in my conscience?" During the trial, she did not recognize the Zampulla, who she had identified as the famous Carmelo and her alleged accomplice. Giuseppe Ricciardi confirmed her alibi. She was in Prato for work. He denied in heartfelt tones that he had even taken part in any murderous plan against his family. However, his figure did not appear clear to the court, given that, upon arriving at the scene of the crime, Ricciardi seemed more concerned with understanding which and how many precious objects had disappeared, then he was heartbroken at having lost his loved ones. Having been taken to the police station, he rushed, sobbing, into Rina Ford's arms, shouting, "Rina, mine!" despite the police having informed him that the woman was the main suspect. However, Ricciardi took a civil action against his ex-lover, an act which earned him a severe reprimand from his brother-in-law lawyer, who in turn took a civil action. During the trial, his brother-in-law accused him of having been a terrible husband and father, and of having mistreated his wife. Meanwhile, Rina Ford was transferred from San Vittore to Perugia prison. When she, as usual, at the end of a hearing, she was given the last word, Rina Ford, came out with a sort of bitter, unscrupulous proclamation. "I could say that I'm not afraid of the sentence. They will be the judges. Give me 5 years of life imprisonment. What good is it? Now I'm fourth." On 9 April 1952, she was sentenced to life imprisonment, while Zampulla and Ricciardi were acquitted of all charges, despite the fact that the investigators' findings at the crime scene had murderous gap, and there remained doubt that a woman alone could have killed with such violence. The appeal to the Court of Cassation, considered on 25 November 1953, confirmed the life sentence. Rina Ford always refused to consider herself the only one guilty of the massacre. In a letter to her lawyer, she wrote, "I'm not the amount of punishment that scares me. There is a part of the crime that I didn't commit, and I don't want to." During the trial, she tried to prove that she was at least not involved in the killing of the 3 children, but she was not believed. In her speech, the plaintiff lawyer Armando Radice uttered words of great impact. "We would like to believe you, madam, but she knows, in good conscience, that she killed the children." The black gloves covered her hands and intended to silence her cautions, because the black glove that wraps her hand is the rejection of what the hand has done. Rina Ford served her sentence in Perugia prison until 1960, when, for health reasons, she was transferred to Trani prison, which enjoyed more favorable climatic conditions. She then passed to the Murate prison in Florence. She asked for and obtained the Pappalardo family's forgiveness. On 12 September 1965, he received a pardon from the President of the Republic, Giovanni Leone. In the same year, Giuseppe Ricciardi, her former lover, who in the meantime had remarried and had another children, died. Since 1975, she took up the surname Benedette from her ex-husband Giuseppe, and she lived a private life in Florence with a family who had welcomed her after her release, also calling herself Rina Furlan, until her death due to a heart attack on March 2, 1988. Remember to subscribe, leave a like, comment, and follow the Queen Bee on TikTok. See you next week with another episode.